First of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here to hear a little bit about SharePoint and Microsoft Teams and how these two platforms are working together and what are the common grounds on both platforms on how you can leverage your intelligent workplaces inside your organizations. Before we go into the presentation, I'm sure you've seen this already. Huge thanks to all the sponsors that made this awesome event possible. And a brief introduction about who I am. So my name is Joao Ferreira. I'm from Portugal. I've been working with SharePoint for the last 8 years. And recently I made a move to the Microsoft Teams field. So SharePoint, it's still present on my day-to-day job, but I'm more into the Teams workspace nowadays than I am in the Microsoft SharePoint space. There it's also the logo of the company that I work for. They were kind enough to pay me for the travel, so I added it there. It's busy. We have an awesome solution for SharePoint and Microsoft Teams, so if you want to check that later on. And I'm also a Microsoft Office development MVP. So for today's session, I will show you how you can integrate both platforms and how you can get some of the data from your SharePoint into Microsoft Teams. And all of this can be done without writing code by citizen developers with a little amount of code, or you can go hardcore development and build robust and incredible solutions. Who here is already using Teams? Okay, and who has a SharePoint Intranet in place? People go there? Do you have a lot of usage there? No? Yes? Medium? All right. So where do you spend most of your day working if you compare Teams and SharePoint? Do you spend more time on SharePoint or more time on Teams? Teams, all right. So that's common across all organizations. So more and more people will spend time working on Teams, and you can easily bring everything you have on SharePoint to Microsoft Teams, and people will start using SharePoint without even knowing that they are on SharePoint, and this way you are increasing the adoption of SharePoint, and you will get finally your SharePoint Intranet getting some usage. So what is Microsoft Teams? Teams is this hub for collaboration, and it's basically where you can do everything in your work. It can, for most of the users on Microsoft Teams, they can easily replace the entire operating system by the Teams application, because nowadays with first-line workers, with Teams for Education, everything can really be done inside of this platform. So before we jump into this topic, I have this video.
Developers.
Do you know when this was filmed? This was in 2000, 20 years ago. So, and Ballmer was screaming developers, and by this time SharePoint was about to get born. Project How was a reality already, so I'm sure that most of the developers in this room at some point in their careers did something for SharePoint, and SharePoint have been around for the last 20 years. So you have a lot of investment made on the platform, so it doesn't make sense for you to put everything in the trash can and start all over from scratch just because Teams, it's a more appealing solution. So quit here. it's 1 hour of Balmer screaming developers. If you need inspiration, put this video on play on YouTube. So if Balmer was still around, I'm sure he would be screaming Teams. And this is because Teams is the fastest growing enterprise solution ever on Microsoft, with more than 20 million daily active users. It surpassed everything, even the numbers of any version of Microsoft Windows. So it's the place to be, it's the place to build solutions, and it's really the future of the modern workplace. So let's see what are the out-of-the-box integrations. Teams already come with 3 or 4 out-of-the-box integrations that you can use to connect SharePoint. Some of them were not designed specifically for SharePoint, but they will help you. So what are the common grounds between these two platforms, and what make them tied together to the point that we can easily reuse the code we had on SharePoint on Microsoft Teams? So the bottom layer of Microsoft Teams, part of the bottom layer is SharePoint. So files are hosted on SharePoint. Each team has its own site collection, and so on and so on. You have tons of integrations. News on SharePoint can be easily spread to Teams. Teams doesn't have a functionality to spread news across your teams, but with SharePoint and with the SharePoint connector for Teams, you can easily use it. You can build landing pages for Teams, things that are not by default in the platform using SharePoint, and you can leverage the power of SharePoint lists also inside of Teams. So the Teams architecture can be reduced to these 3 Russian dolls. We have Teams. Inside of Teams, we have channels. And inside of channels, we then have tabs. Physically, this used to be just like this. So each team had its own site collection, and then each channel had a folder inside of the main document library. This is how things used to work until 2 or 3 months ago, when private channels were released. And for private channels, instead of having a folder for the channel, each private channel gets its own site collection. This for SharePoint administrators, it's a nightmare. I bet it is. These site collections are special site collections. They do not appear in the administration portal on SharePoint. You don't have to worry in reality about the maximum limit of site collections, because it was increased to an insane amount of site collections. But you should not use the private channel site collections to build things on top of SharePoint. They are limited site collections. They don't have pages. You only get the document library. You can get there your custom lists, but it's about it. And don't ever touch the permissions, because they get overwritten in a blink of an eye again by Microsoft Teams. So this is how things look today. If you compare the architectures of both platforms, this is what a team is translated on SharePoint. So working with SharePoint files. So let me bring my laptop here, because I will. Not a good idea. If you have files on SharePoint, so if you have files on SharePoint and on Teams, you will see that by default, you will get this Files tab. This is connecting directly to the shared document on the site collection. This is good if you are starting Teams from scratch, but what about if you have already tons of document libraries in the site collections or in multiple site collections? To help you with that, Microsoft included this app for Teams called Document Library. This allows you to pick document libraries from other site collections or from the site collection where you are, and also allows you to introduce a URL directly to the library. You need to be careful with permissions because if someone in the team doesn't have access to the site collection, they will not see the content in the site collection. But let me just click here. Let me check if this one has documents. It has. So documents, save. So it adds the library immediately to Teams. And if we compare the out-of-the-box integration with the SharePoint app, things doesn't look much different. There are more options nowadays in this one. So you have the full OneDrive SharePoint library experience here. And on this one, you get less features. But if you want to edit a document directly from here, you are absolutely okay by doing it. So the Word app will open here immediately, and you will be able to start working with a few clicks on the document. So this is how you can bring the documents that you have on your SharePoint environment for years to Microsoft Teams and to start to get some momentum to bring back usage to your intranet. So landing pages. Landing pages are the entry point for the intranets. Usually people like to get corporate news, calendars, announcements, those kind of things. That concept does not exist on Microsoft Teams, and probably it doesn't make much sense inside of a team. But you can build it as an app, as a personal app, and define it as the first app of your teams for all the users, or you can bring it for your team if you want to. And this can be done with another app that is included by default. There is the SharePoint app. However, you have to build the entire page on your SharePoint. So if you want to build a home page like this one, this is the home page of the site collection of the team. You can do it on SharePoint, and it will allow you to pick the page from the SharePoint app. So instead of using the document library, now I will use the SharePoint. And this will list all the pages that exist on the site collection, plus it will also list the lists that exist on the site collection. So if I want to create my landing page, the only thing I have to do is click on Save, and it will bring it immediately. Since we are talking about modern SharePoint, the app connects directly to the page. The page knows that it's being rendered inside of Microsoft Teams. And as you can see, all the Chromes on the page, menus, logos, modern footers, all of that was removed, and you get just the content inside of the SharePoint app. What about displaying other pages from other site collections? So if you want to do that, you will not be able to use this app. So this app, it's only getting the pages from the site collection, but we can use the website app. So the website app allows you basically to define any URL in the web to be displayed inside of Microsoft Teams, and SharePoint is no exception here. So I already have it here. This is pointing to the root site of this site collection. It's a modern hub on SharePoint, and if we give it a few seconds to load, the only difference that you will see between this and the other pages is that sometimes we get, here it is, we get this top bar. If the page does not reload, please click here to open it in the browser. It doesn't make much sense because we can do exactly the same thing on this icon. So that's the only difference. Yeah, they will render as well. I will cover that also later on in the session. But they will render exactly as this does. And there's a special page inside of each site collection that I will also mention that is handle all the connections to the SharePoint, is authenticating the users and all of that. So it's already connected to Azure, but I will show you on the SPFX part of the session. So lists. Lists are other things that you can import. And with modern SharePoint, now we have rich ways of displaying the information on the list. So if I go here again to SharePoint and pick this playlist, this is not ugly as it used to be on the classic SharePoint, on SharePoint 2013 and 2016, but it's a list. And I'm sure we can transform the way this looks like to get a better UI that the users can use to read the information. So SharePoint lists nowadays allow you to customize the views using a JSON file that transforms the way things are displayed here. And you can define your modified view as the main view of your list. And Teams also support that. So if we go here to this and select car fleet instead of the playlist, this view was customized using our SharePoint view. This is how it looks. And if we go over here, it opens by default with the customization. So this is kind of building apps for Teams using lists without doing basically nothing. So it's just building the JSON file. It's not complicated. There are a lot of examples online. Do you guys know the PNP initiative? So there's a repo on GitHub with tons of examples that you can use. This one is also there. So it's just a matter of building the JSON with the HTML and then referencing the columns, and they will look like this. So now let's see how we can extend Microsoft Teams. So we have three different ways. Well, we have more ways of extending it, but we can divide it in three different sections. No-code solutions, low-code solutions, and code from scratch. And if we look here to the time that they take to build and the ability to customizing them, we see that the no-code solutions are the first ones that appear here. Low-code solutions are there, and then we have the code from scratch. You can do whatever you want to, but obviously it will take you much more time to develop because it's done with code and from scratch. So no-code solutions, I will not show any of the no-code solution apps. So Microsoft Teams has an app store like the ones we have on our mobile phones. It starts getting more and more apps every day. Last time I checked, it had 300 apps already. And those apps can be divided in 5 different categories. So we have personal apps, and personal apps are apps that display data that it's only relevant to you, and you are the one that chooses if the app is visible or not, and you have one over there at the top. That's a personal app. It can be defined as the first app by the administrator of the organization or not, but this is what personal apps are. We have bots. We have tabs for Teams. We have connectors to connect to other platforms and to post messages on channels. And we have messaging extensions that basically also connect to other platforms and get data from the platforms and introduce it inside of a Teams chat. So this is the no-code solution. If you are looking for something on Teams, go to the store. There are integrations with SharePoint. There are more and more apps every day. So this is the way to go. Then on the low-code solution, we have the Power Platform. If you were on the keynote, you saw the momentum that the Power Platform is getting. Everything it's easy to do with the Power Platform. There is a lot of people supporting it. There's a lot of people talking about it in the internet. So if you want to get started and if you want to build your Power Apps for Teams, you have no problem at all because there's default integration with Power Apps and Teams already built. We have Power Automate. And Power Automate, I will show you how it can be integrated with SharePoint. We have app templates, and app templates are solutions that were made by Microsoft, and they connect Teams, SharePoint, Azure, and a lot of other platforms. They may consume Azure. You may have to pay consumption to use those, but the one that we have here running, it's basically one of those app templates that Microsoft did. This is a messaging extension that it's basically getting one item from a SharePoint list. So you do a search, it retrieves it, posts it directly to the chat, and when the people click on the see more, then it opens the SharePoint page. So you don't need to go to SharePoint to look for the items on your lists. You can search directly from your message box on Teams. And this, it's pretty much built. It's just a matter of running a PowerShell script, and it will be deployed to your tenant. The only thing you have to make sure that you have the right permissions to do it. And then we have the App Studio, that it's an app that Microsoft built that empowers everyone to build their own apps inside of Microsoft Teams, and we will see how it looks. So, before we go into the App Studio, I missed here a slide. I want to show you how things are integrated on Power Automate and on Teams. So if we start to trigger with a SharePoint, for instance, when an item is created, we have a lot of then actions from Teams. So if I type here Teams, you will see that there are a lot of things that you can do. And there are also triggers for Teams as well. You can start it with triggers. So in this example, what I have here is every time an announcement is posted in a classic SharePoint announcement list that nowadays no one uses because no one sees what's posted there, the announcement will be posted directly inside of a team. And if I go here to the announcements, and if I type here something, demo, save it. All right, it's there. And now if I go here to the general channel, we already have it here. So I added the announcement to the list on SharePoint. It was posted automatically inside of Microsoft Teams. The other way of doing low-code solutions is using the App Studio. The App Studio is a really powerful tool. I don't start any app for Teams nowadays without using this app first. This generates all the JSON elements that you need for your app. And it can be used by anyone that has permissions to install apps from the store inside of the organization. People can build their own personal apps and bring their own stuff to Microsoft Teams. So If we open the App Studio, it needs to be installed. On mine, it's already. And if we open here this example, this PNP example, we have the app details. All of those things that you see here are mandatory. Some of them can be ignored if you will not submit the app to the store. Things like the package name, version, short description, full descriptions. These are things that will make your app fail if you want to submit it to the store and if you don't follow Microsoft rules. But if you will use the app internally, put there whatever you want, and the same thing for the privacy and terms of use. This will trigger warnings when you install it, but it will work just fine. Same thing for the icons. If you don't follow the rules to create the icons, Microsoft will fail the approval of the app. I've been there. They are really, really strict with what you do with the icons and with the policy and all of that. It took me a month to get an app into the store. So if you have plans to submit it, make sure that you fill this and read the documentation carefully before submitting it there. Then we have the possibility to build tabs, bots, connectors, and messaging extensions. And tabs include personal tabs and Teams tabs. And these are the 5 types of apps that we've seen in the App Store. A team tab will work just inside of a team context, and it will make the app work in 2 different contexts if you also add the personal tab. So for this example, I will just use a personal tab. Here, if I edit this, I have just the name, an ID. The ID needs to be unique, but you can use whatever you want to, and the content URL. And as you can see, this is pointing to a GitHub documentation page. That's how simple it is to build your own app. But this session, it's about SharePoint and Teams. What do you think? Do you think that it's easy to get SharePoint easily integrated into one of these apps? Well, it's supposed to be that easy, but I will show you. I have here two SharePoint tabs, both with the same page, and I will quickly sign out here because now it will work because I already did the authentication, and I will sign in again, and you will see what will happen. So when you sign in on Teams, you are signing in on Office 365. So supposedly you are already authenticated to the entire platform. And Teams should be able to handle the authentication through all the platforms that belong to the Microsoft ecosystem. In reality, it doesn't do it, especially with SharePoint. And if I open this PNP, and if I just copy and paste the link from the page that I want to display into the App Studio, when the user logins on SharePoint, he will see nothing but this empty page. That's what will happen until he visits something that authenticates him on SharePoint. On the other end, this one was built already with the hidden page that exists in all SharePoint site collections that handles the authentication, and it displays the page immediately. Now that I visit a page that does the authentication, this one will work as well. So if you want to build your own apps for Microsoft Teams using the App Studio, there are a few things that you need to be aware of. So if I go here to the PNP app, I will go here to the tabs, and I will show you how the tab that didn't work looks like. So it's just the link to the page, and that's what I expected to work. So the idea of this app is to empower everyone to build their own apps. But the way to make it work, it's a bit more complex. So if you look to the URL, it starts, well, it's pointing to the root site collection, but I think it can be pointed to any site collection. I pointed to here because all the users should have access to the root site, so the page is there, so you can do it, no worries. There's this event page that handles the authentication. It's Teams logon.aspx, followed by the SPFX true. You asked about the SPFX. This is the page that the SPFX uses inside of Teams. And then there's another setting here, destination, and here it's where you will add the relative URL to your SharePoint page. But this is not enough to make it work. On a Teams app, you need to register all the domains that will be rendered inside of Microsoft Teams, mainly because this is rendered inside of an iframe and things need to be whitelisted. And Microsoft does it automatically for all the domains that you add. But there are a lot more that you need to whitelist. And this list with all these wildcards, login, SharePoint dog food, those things here, all of these things are necessary in order for you to be successfully authenticated on Microsoft Teams, because all the redirects that are made through the authentication process can go through all these domains. And last but not least, you need to get here the ID of the application from Azure. This is created by default by Microsoft. This is the ID that is used by the SharePoint Framework web parts. All Azure tenants have this, and it's just a matter of reusing that code because it's the same in all the tenants. And after doing all of this, you are able to then finally open your page inside of SharePoint. And this is for modern SharePoint. What do you think will happen with classic SharePoint pages? They will not work by default unless you modify the master page, and I hope there's no one from Microsoft here to crucify me. But yes, they will not work, but you can make them work by adding an extra tag to the master page that basically tells the master that that site is allowed to be rendered inside of an iframe. And you don't have to worry about doing anything else. One thing that will not work is this authentication. You will have to make sure that the user is already authenticated. So I would say that doing this with classic pages, it's not a solution. So if you are planning to build an app for Teams, plan it to work from day one with modern pages. All right, so code from scratch. There are two ways to build apps for Teams from scratch. We have the SharePoint framework that fully supports Microsoft Teams. Well, there are days that it fully supports it. There are others that it doesn't want to work. Today is one of those days. And we have Microsoft Teams framework that allows you to build apps for Teams. Currently, the only ones that can go to the store are these ones. Teams, SharePoint apps are not distributed through the store. But let's see how it works together. So here, I have already a solution. This is a web part that I made to exemplify how things work on both sides. And if you look here, I don't know if you can see it, but I can try to increase it. So on the supported hosts over there, we have SharePoint web part and we have Teams web part. That means that this web part, once installed on SharePoint, will be also able to be rendered inside of Teams. So if you have someone building web parts for SharePoint, for your modern SharePoint, or if you are building web parts for modern SharePoint, make sure that you turn this on because you are targeting two different platforms with the same code. Once you install the app, and this is where things sometimes don't want to work, but I'm sure Microsoft will fix it. That's configuration on the SPFX app, exactly. So you build everything like you do for SharePoint, and then you just need to add those settings to the manifest, and it will generate the JSON file and the installation file. Then on the app catalog, that I should have opened here somewhere, I have this solution here, and if you look here to the sync to Teams, this is not highlighted. However, this one, it's enabled for us to use. So if we click here, supposedly this would trigger the installation of the app directly into Teams. And this normally works. I didn't test this demo before the session, so today it's not working. But I have it here installed. Yeah, making it available for people to add inside of our container. So this is the app running on Teams, on SharePoint. And if I go here to Teams, to the apps, I also have it here, video playlist. This is what SharePoint does automatically for you. However, I had to upload it using, I don't have it here right now, but I had to upload it using a zip file. So inside of the solution file, and maybe I can show you here. So this is the project, the SPFX project. And there's another folder called Teams inside of it. And this is your app. This is what you will be installing on Teams. And if for some reason the button on SharePoint is not installing the app, the only thing you have to do is zip these 3 files, go to the App Store, and upload them. And that's it. It will connect with the files that are hosted already on SharePoint. On the other side, we can build apps for Teams and reuse them on SharePoint. So if you had someone building a fantastic app for Microsoft Teams and people is using it on your organization, and I have here a not so great app, but an example. So we have here a to-do list. This is an app that was made for Teams, and basically it allows me to put here my to-do list. This is nothing but a JSON file and 2 icons as we've seen. But if I zip the file, and if I go to, not here, here, if I go to the app catalog, as you can see, here we have not a SharePoint package, but a zip file. And this zip file is our Teams package. And if I go to, my mouse died. If I go here and edit this page, where I already have this app, and look for my to-do, here it is. close it. Oh, come on. Well, doesn't matter. I have it here. I tested this morning, so it's here and it's working. So this is the same app we had on Teams, but working inside of SharePoint. So you can bring things from SharePoint to Teams and from Teams to SharePoint. What do you think it is the best way, or what do you think will be the best beneficial way of building things? Building it for Teams or building it for SharePoint? for getting the Power Apps, if we are talking about the code solutions, all right. It's a valid point, but it can turn out to be expensive. And here are the top 10 reasons why building an SPFX app for Teams can be better than building an app directly for Microsoft Teams. And there are a few important things here. So you don't have to worry about the authentications. SharePoint Framework handles that for you. So you don't have to register business applications or applications on Azure and handle the authentication flow. SharePoint does it automatically. You don't have to worry about hosting your app. SharePoint hosts the app for you, so you don't have to create an Azure site. SharePoint handles the configuration, so the same page, the same property pane you have on SharePoint works exactly the same way inside of Microsoft Teams. If you are building a Teams app from scratch, you will have to handle all the validations and the building. And the most important thing, SharePoint has a free CDN already in place that you can take advantage of. If you follow the Teams route, you will have to pay for the hosting and you will have to pay for the usage. Everything SharePoint related, it's already included on your subscription. The only downside is that you can get throttled if you don't do things properly. So if you do a lot of requests, eventually Microsoft will stop your API calls. So these are the top reasons. There are a few others that are not listed here, but I want to mention the last one, and this it's what for me makes it worth above all the others. It's the spirit of this community. So if you need to build something and if you don't know how, or if you are having an issue, if you reach to someone from the SharePoint community, I'm sure they will get back to you, or someone will get an answer for your problem in no time. So for me personally, this is the way to go to build or to extend Microsoft Teams. The only exception is if you are an ISV and need to get your app on the store. That way, you will have to use the Microsoft Teams framework and build the app for Teams from scratch. Yeah, that's also possible, and it's a good thing that you mentioned. Microsoft is well aware of this problem, and nowadays there's a new setting on the Teams app manifest. I didn't went through the details of the manifest, but this App Studio, what it does, it generates a manifest, a JSON file with all the settings. And if you are an ISV, you need to get some numbers to show Microsoft. And if we go here, there's this partner ID. So if you put here your NPN ID, even if you are not distributing the app through the store, Microsoft will be able to count the usage of all your apps. And this counts as much as having the app on the store for Microsoft. So this is the only thing, and this can be done also on the SPFX web part. The only thing, and I didn't test yet on the 1.10, but the only thing is that you need to manually go to the JSON file and put there this property, the npm ID, because it's not available in the configurations of the SharePoint framework. All right, so we are right in time. Here are my contacts. So if you have any question, you can do it. You can ask it now. If you remember something later on, you can reach me through Twitter, through email. I also have two blogs, one about SharePoint, another one about Microsoft Teams. So feel free to reach out. I have some stickers here from Teams and SharePoint, so if you want to get them, feel free. And thank you for being here today. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Feel free. Hey.
Thanks very much. Good to meet you. How do you say your name?
It's João. It's the Portuguese version of John.